Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Nicky Hammond. Welcome to Thriving Adoptees. Looking forward to this conversation today.
Hello, Simon. Thanks for having me.
So, Nicky's down under. We're about 12 hours time difference, roughly 12 hours time difference at the moment. We don't have many Aussies on, so it's always a treat, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure.
have my funny accent and
Yeah. I didn't say g'day or make any L than G jokes or call you Sheila or anything like that, any of these stereotypes. We don't give a Castlemaine 4X for any of those, do we? So let's be serious. Healing. Is there any more serious topic than healing? What if we could laugh at our trauma? That's like, what does
I think
healing?
that's great.
It is,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here I go again. Here I go again. Here I go again down this trauma tunnel where you only notice it when you've come out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting way to describe it, that's for sure. But yeah, so often when you're in the sticky situation, when you're going through that dark tunnel, you don't know that you're in there.
No, no.
Yeah.
We think it's all right. We've got so accustomed um, to darkness, it becomes our lived experience for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we keep on seeking enlightenment, don't we? That's the
Um,
thing.
I don't think everyone does, but I think for many of us, that's something that's, yeah, becomes either interesting or necessary or, I don't know, like a kind of mission. Who knows why? But there are definitely lots of us. And obviously, you're on that mission for yourself as well as for others, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The most beautiful thing I've heard about this subject is that actually there's no such thing as enlightenment. We're already the light, but that light, it has been darkened.
Oh. I think that's true. I think that's true. I think that we come here um like the purity of being a baby or a child. And then when we talk, because you asked me this question, to ponder this question, what is healing? And thinking about it in the context of something happens to us, something doesn't happen to us, our body is stressed, our mind or emotions or spiritual self gets put into a situation where we don't cope with it in the moment, and then there's something to heal. So yeah, so as a pure child, maybe we haven't experienced what though the things that need to be healed. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
was thinking about this the other day, and I was
yeah.
thinking, well, because I was David Anthony Flower before I was Simon Jonathan Ben, right?
Mm,
And I was thinking, well, um, David Anthony Flower
yeah.
wasn't kind of relinquished. He was. It's Simon Jonathan Ben that's got the relinquishment trauma.
Yeah. It is an interesting thought t- if we think back before adoption. And I mean, I think even that, some of the listeners might be going, "Oh," because for me, I hadn't thought about being in utero until quite recently. Like it just didn't exist for me. So yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think there must be some though chemicals and um, experiences that comes from our birth mothers as well in utero during
Yeah,
that time.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So the fetus that hadn't been named,
yeah,
or maybe I don't know when she came up with a name for me, right? But the
yeah,
fetus hadn't been named, and hadn't been named, but the fetus was pickled in was probably pickled in cortisol, right?
Yeah.
The stress, you
Yeah.
talked about stress, you know,
Yes.
you've got a mother's, um, well, maybe you can talk about a mother's view on their child and a mother's attachment to their child, because you're a mum, right? I'm not, I'm definitely not a mum, and I also happen not to be a dad either. I could never have been
Yeah.
but if we look at the experience in utero, there's some trauma there, and
Yes.
then there's some trauma later on with relinquishment, and then there may be trauma on top of that, trauma in the adoptive family home, but they're built up over layers. They're built up over
Yeah.
time, and we can't distinguish them. I came up with this metaphor the other day. It's like a latte macchiato, right?
Yeah.
A latte is in different sections. So if we've got the in utero stress, we've got the relinquishment
Yes.
trauma, and we've got any trauma that happens after that. It's like three different layers of the
Yeah.
latte macchiato, but they're
Yeah.
separated out. But in real life, they're all combined into one coffee, right?
Yes, as the
Yeah,
one personality or human or yeah manifestation in that human. It's true. I read somewhere it was quite interesting. I can't remember which book it was, but it was a specific adoption book, and it talked about how when we're if we're relinquished as a baby at a very young age, what happens when we're so small is that our point of reference is love. Our point of reference is at the bosom of our mother. And if we don't have that, then growing up, we may not have a reference for that sense of, and I don't even know how to explain that, but it is essentially like love and nurturing and maternalism that, and so sometimes I think for many adoptees, a lot of us manifest in like people pleasing, et cetera, et cetera. And I hate the thought that, you know, I have a counselor and I said to her last time I saw her, you know, sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to be normal. And she says, no, 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 don't think about it like that. There is no normal. But I still think for us as adoptees who are relinquished as babies, it is interesting to think about like that stress that happens at that young age of relinquishment and then how it impacts like our ongoing development and who we are because we don't have that point of reference. And it could be true for some of us, it could not be true for some of us. I don't know. To me, kind of feels true. Yeah.
um, yeah. I think there's so some babies are taken away from their
Yeah.
birth mothers in the old, I'm talking the olden days, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 60s. Um, and I've heard stories from the States where the mother was knocked out with drugs, and
Yeah.
the baby was, so she didn't experience the delivery, and then the baby was never held up to her, was just whisked away straight off. So because they believed
Yeah.
in that day, in those days, that um, the bond would be tougher if it had been
Oh,
made in the first place.
wow.
But you're talking about the bond has been going on for 9 months, hasn't
Already
it?
there. Well, that like yeah, you're right. Because and when you say what's it like as a mother, is like as a mother doing the research, like looking through a perspective of, you know, kind of traditional like pregnancy, mothering, and I really got into this attachment theory, and then thinking about like in utero, the sound of the heart, the sound of the voice, the flavors of the food. You know, I was adopted from South Korea, and one of my go-tos is to eat like 2 minute Korean noodles now. That's like if I feel sick or you know, kind of feeling like I need to pick me up, like I'm feeling down. And I kind of think now, you know, as an older person, as a younger person, I didn't even know what that tasted like. But as an older person, I'm like, because that's what, you know, that flavor, that spice is what I was drinking in utero. It's the flavors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the
Yeah.
taste of home.
Yeah, I guess there's something about it. There's some, but then having said that, there's trauma, I think, around language. Many adoptees who are from Korea that I've met have found it really difficult to connect with the language. So for me, I learnt French as a young person in high school, and my French is quite good. And then as a young adult, because I didn't kind of go through that identity piece and connect to my original Korean heritage until I was maybe 25. And when I started learning the language, I got into it. I lived there for a year and a half. But for some reason, I lost, and I don't know whether it's like the way our brain works for learning languages, but I lost all my Korean, almost all of it. And like, but I've retained quite a lot of the French. So it's so interesting. And when I talk to other adoptees who are Korean, they say, oh, there's definitely a trauma there in order to learn the language. So I don't know. That's the opposite. You know, I want the Korean food, but somehow my brain won't hold on to the Korean language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of clearly all sorts of questions that go on there. I think the key thing for me, or the key thing that's worked for me, is seeing that, you know, despite despite these layers of trauma. So you know, did you feel that? Well, yeah. Let me finish on. Despite the layers of trauma in the macchiato glass, you know, those triangular shaped glasses with little tiny glass thumb holders. We're the glass. We're not the trauma.
Mm, yeah.
So in
Yeah.
some way,
And that's
this
what
identity.
healing is. So when you talk about healing, that's what healing is. It's like, we're the glass. And so the thing inside, like, yeah, the thing inside of us, because I believe that, I think it's a process. It's different for all of us. And maybe we don't want to be a clear, empty glass, you know? Maybe that's part of it. It's like maybe we could drink the whole macchiato, or the whole macchiato could be cleaned out and put in the dishwasher. But is that honestly what we want to do? I don't know. It's interesting. It's an interesting analogy.
It's. I think it's me. It's just I mean, every metaphor has its, you know, limits, right? You can
Yeah.
stretch any metaphor that I come up with. People, it can always be stretched beyond the limits. Um, I'm simply saying that disidentifying from our disidentifying from my trauma
Ah, okay.
was one of the most profound, and continues to be one of the most profound uh, healing moments when I step back, but and also recognizing that, you know,
Yeah.
I don't have that, you know, if the transracial the transracial adoption piece can be another um,
Yeah, layer. The
another
chocolate on top.
layer of trauma. Yeah, it can be the chocolate on top. Yeah, it can be,
But
but I don't have that
yeah.
in my I
Yeah.
don't have that in my glass. I don't
Yeah.
have that in
You,
my macchiato glass because I was a white kid adopted by white parents. So
yeah.
yeah, but we're still the same glass, whatever
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever the contents are in it. And I'm thinking about, you know, like and too much caffeine. You know, like too much caffeine. Yeah, can drive us nuts, can it?
Yeah.
It gets our heart racing. So there's a similar there's a strange similarity between cortisol and caffeine. You know, well, they're both
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same.
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's true. But when you say the disidentifying with the trauma, like for me, the healing part was actually identifying it because I grew up with a complete rejection, self-rejection, but absolutely no support whatsoever within my, family, that my adopted family, for what that looked like, because it was a British mentality of like, please don't talk about that. That doesn't exist. As you don't need a psychologist. You've grown up in a loving family. That's it. So actually, for me to identify, like, oh, and there was trauma. It's like, oh, I get it now. Like, I wasn't going crazy because I gaslit myself into thinking, what's wrong with you? You've got this amazing situation. What are you hungering for?
And
So
that's the inner conflict, isn't it? That's the
yes,
inner conflict
yeah,
where part of you is uh, part of you is feeling the love, but part of you isn't feeling loved.
Yeah.
And that there's this idea that I think all adoptive parents were told back in the day, that their love will trump our relinquishment. Like,
I don't think they learned that it was trauma.
no, they
I
didn't.
honestly
They didn't
don't.
know. They
Yeah.
didn't know.
No, they didn't know
But they
that, so
didn't
they
know
didn't know how
because,
to support it.
yeah, they
Mm.
and this is, I say this a lot at the moment. You know, we are judging 70s parenting on we're judging 20th century parenting on 21st century trauma knowledge,
Yeah.
and that's the source of our resentment,
Yeah.
because we're saying they should have done better. Well, they didn't know better, so they
Yeah.
they didn't know better, so they couldn't do better.
Look, I think in some aspects they didn't know better, and then in some aspects the institutions and the people didn't know better. Like, I think we can't excuse them for all of it. But you're right, around the trauma, maybe that's true. But there are some parts of it that I just think, look.
But the institutions were denying it. The institutions were
Yeah.
denying it. They were getting,
Yeah.
they were thinking they were getting a good, and how much I sometimes hold up my parents' post adoption education.
Yeah.
It's a single page of A4 paper.
Wow. And
In,
to me, like, it maybe it's not about the trauma, but it's also about the process. For me, personally, seeing the institutionalization of intercountry adoption and the transracial adoption, like that piece particularly, I think they knew. I think there's a lot of illegal, like that's what I'm realizing. There are a lot of illegal adoptions, and it's where they weren't adopting cats and dogs; they were adopting humans and bringing them in from different countries. And I'm like, okay, that's an eye opener for me.
yeah, because
Yeah.
the money thing comes
Yes.
it comes in here, and is the money thing is the cause of the grey market, and then the black market,
Yes.
and then we're
Yes.
commodities, and that feels, uh,
Yeah.
I don't often swear on the podcast. That feels fucking awful. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
uh,
And let's also acknowledge as well, many of the mothers had a lot of trauma about infertility, which was never addressed.
indeed.
Like, I know that my mum never addressed that. So I know that's a piece of, you know, and I think, yeah, they didn't know, and
Uh,
at what point do you take responsibility? Because here we are taking responsibility just for, and I mean, there's no end goal. It's just about like curiosity and learning and self-improvement. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I think if more people in the world took responsibility for themselves, the world would be a far kinder sort of place.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the first step, going back a couple of minutes, the first step in your healing was coming out of the fog. Then, really, was it realizing this?
My first step was probably the identity piece, like the cultural identity piece. Yeah. So
What, realizing it, or realizing it had
yeah,
been taken away?
realizing, so rejecting, like realizing that obviously I realized I'm Asian, I looked different to my mum, but really rejecting like having people in high school who were Korean coming up and saying, wow, you're Korean, and me going, you're just weird. Like, just because I look Korean on the outside, there's no part of me that feels connected to that identity. But then as a 20-year-old at university, this was my first epiphany, working with Aboriginal young people and helping them find their culture. And then realizing partway through that process that in fact, perhaps my maybe my curiosity was also about myself. And then enrolling in a Master's of International Studies, majoring in Heritage Studies, which was Korean. So I probably didn't eat Korean food till I was like 19. I had some Korean friends who like were trying to, you know, be Korean with me and I didn't even know what that meant. I had lots of Asian friends. I identified as an Asian Australian, um, but only through outwardly, you know, inwardly, I've sort of, so I'm sure, you know, I thought that I was white. I thought that I was a privileged white person, even though on the outside, you know, and even when you say to me today, like, oh, you're a person of color, I have to kind of pause and go, hang on a minute. Oh, yeah, that's true. You know?
So is it a confusion? Is it like a forgetting? Is it
Now it's
a
not.
shouting?
Now it's not. I think it was. Now it's like I didn't grow up as as a like in a conventional Asian environment, of course, but after going to Asia, spending time in Asia, living in South Korea for almost 2 years, learning some of the language, learning some of the culture, I identify as Korean. My children are now learning some Korean because they're interested in it. Like they, you know, they just signed up to some app and they're learning the letters. And even though I don't speak a lot of Korean and I'm not fluent, I made peace with me being an interracial, intercountry adoptee who is Korean. So I think the first piece was that identity piece, like going, who am I? And I'm also an identical twin. So, you know, there's also that, and we were adopted together by the same white Australian family in Sydney, you know. So there was also that identity piece of like separate, being separate from my twin, like almost identifying through high school, as like, oh, the twins, and then having an experience like away. I didn't go to Korea first. I lived in France for a year first, and having the experience of being like my own individual person, and almost now doing a 360, coming back and being like, oh yeah, that's right, I am a twin, I am an adoptee, because I think I kind of wanted to explore my identity outside of that. Yeah.
Explore your identity outside of
Being
Asia.
like the twin who's,
Oh,
you know, a transracial, because you can lean on that. Like that's a story, you know, that's like a piece of your identity. But I'm also, you know, all the other things I'm interested in, like passionate about coaching or breath work or, you know, for, you know, when I was parenting and doing the attachment parenting stuff, like all of those things. I work in community development as well, like all of these things that I do, which are aside from being an adoptee or an intercountry adoptee. I let that go. I kind of didn't even tell people for a while. But as you know, I don't know whether you grew up, but being a transracial adoptee, people are always asking like, oh, you've got no accent. How is that possible? And I ended up as a young person just giving them a lot of information. Like I'd, you know, be speaking to taxi drivers and they'd be saying, oh, have you met your birth parents? And it wasn't until almost like quite recently that someone said to me, Nikki, you don't have to give them that information. And I was like, revolution. You know, my sister's actually funny. She used to, people used to say, where are you from? And she used to say, I'm from Paddington, because that's like the name of the suburb where we grew up. But I would always say, oh, I'm from South, I do the whole spiel. I'm from South Korea, but I'm adopted. Da, 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 da. And when I realized at 40, I didn't have to tell them. I sort of took some time. I'm like 46 now, but I took some time to just not tell people. And that was a good process, you know? Yeah.
yeah. So the start of the healing was connecting.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I didn't come out. I lived in Korea for 2 years and I didn't come out of the fog in Korea. I saw these people who were like feeling lost, looking for their parents, who were angry at you know, their experience of being an adoptee. And I just was, that was so foreign to me. I was like, why aren't you grateful? You know, like, well, not that I was getting along great with my mum, I have to say, but like, you know, don't tell a story. That's, and I think that's part of when you know, this people pleasing that I think lots of adoptees bring with themselves because we're so afraid of disconnection and rejection and we're trying to people please and you know and it's the society that brings that out of you know particularly women but all people um so that it wasn't until I started doing my own personal self development at around 40 that I actually came out of the fog. That then I started to like critique this experience I've have and acknowledge that there was trauma there because I didn't understand what trauma was. I didn't really care. And that was the next piece. And then there was one experience where I did this timeline therapy, and I said to you, like, I didn't even think about myself in utero. That was like 4 years ago, or maybe even only 3 years ago, where someone took me in timeline therapy back to the moment I was in my mother's womb. And she didn't realize that she was totally triggering me. And it was fine. I had the tools to deal with it. But for 2 days, I walked around just going, oh, whoa, hang on a minute. I have a Korean mum. I was in the womb of this mother. Like, it was so weird. So that was another epiphany where I was like, oh, trying to make sense of that. And at the same time, making sense of, like, I'm allowed to not be happy and think that's part of my childhood wasn't enough, and crave, have hunger for maternalism and all of these things in connection to culture. I gave myself permission to do those. So that's still happening. I've got a DNA test sitting on my desk over there that I've done a DNA test, but I'm doing a different brand, that's more connected with Korea. And it's sitting there because I'm just in the process still of working through, like, do I want to find, our time runs out if our parents die. Like, do I want to find out? Do I want to meet them? Do I want to know? Because you hear through amazing places like your podcast and, documentaries and stories and meeting people's the perception that you have of where you came from might be so completely different to the actual facts. Like, maybe, the story from me was mum and dad weren't married. Dad, owned in Seoul a corner store. Mum got pregnant. She ran away. Dad couldn't cope, put us up for adoption. That could be an absolute lie. I already know that my birth date's a lie. Like, I think it's a lie because I don't think that it was true. I think they made us seem younger than we were because that seems more enticing for, to get a smaller baby, a younger baby. So I don't know. I'm still processing it all. I'm still working through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this you talked about kind of a relief in not having to share all the details
Yeah. Yeah.
that your sister just says. Well, I'm from Paddington, yeah. And you just and you would go into a whole spiel. Do you think that? Where do you think that? Where do you think that comes from? That need to explain ourselves.
I think it was an insecurity, but also, I mean, I think it's a societal thing. Like, you don't have boundaries, but I think that's further exacerbated by, like I talked about before, like some of the wounds, do you want to call them wounds, or some of the things that we've experienced where um where we're not allowed to have loud voices, when, like, we're afraid that something's going to, like, reject us or hate us or like any of those pieces, so we just try and appease, and it becomes almost just a habit just to be constantly appeasing, so we lose sense of self. And I think, I mean, that probably resonates with lots of people who aren't adopted as well, but particularly with adopted people. What do you think?
Well, I've never really considered this before.
Yeah.
What what came to me was putting together a couple of different things from what you've shared. So, especially just in the last couple of minutes, right? So we've got limited facts. We don't know whether they're true or not. Especially with the transracial adoption piece, and it's done in a foreign country. The regulations may be different, the paperwork may be different, the bureaucracy may be different, the institutions are different, right? So we've got basically we're not sure. You're not sure of your facts, and that maybe wanting to share what you see as the truth is almost a reaction to that. So I'm gonna share so much truth with you because I'm not sure. These are the facts as I see them. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think that's an interesting theory. To be honest, I wouldn't be able to say yes or no, but I'm very like try and be honest, and that's really interesting. Is like when you've been brought up, and but I haven't thought about those facts being untrue until recently. That's the only thing about that. It's like I just thought that was the truth. So I
Yeah,
would thought that I was telling the truth, not that I was, you know, yeah, I don't
yeah.
know.
I mean, I was thinking of a situation 30, 40, probably no, probably 40 years ago, and we were playing. We were on holiday, and we were in a cafe, and I was playing pool with a kid. So I'm maybe 12, 13. The kid's about the same age. His dad's there, my dad's there, obviously my adopted dad, right? And the guy says to my dad, that's your son there, looking at me. And I hear this bloke out the corner of my ear, and look at my dad, and my dad just said, "Yeah, he is, yeah." And I was thinking, well, what would that situation been like? He clearly wouldn't have. If I'd been a transracial adoptee, then that bloke wouldn't have said that. What if he said,
Mm,
who's the lad? Who's that guy?
mm,
Who's that guy? How would my dad have answered? He just said, "Oh, if I'd been Korean and my dad's white, what would have happened there?" And like this, trying to explain it. Are we trying to explain our way into? Trying to explain our way into the family to try and counter a feeling that we don't fit in.
yeah, like constantly like trying to grapple with your own like belief system and trying to prove, yeah, I think that could be true. Like keep saying it, like, and even if it's not like trying to prove it, still trying to grapple with the concept of like, this is where I've come from. Like this, I can't remember feeling particularly uncomfortable about it, but I also know that it was none of their business really, unless I chose for it to be, but I didn't feel like it was a choice at the time. So, but that could also be part of the nurture part of, the way that I was brought up, not just the part of, relinquishment or whatever it left behind, whatever
I
wounds left
guess
behind.
what we're also getting into, in as you said, it's a theory. This is my theory, but we're the are we the kings and queens of overthinking as adoptees? Like we've got all these answers, we've got all these questions, we can't get answers to them. We're not at peace until we get the answers. We have to come up with these complicated theories. Like it's just we've become, as one of my mentors calls, we become morons. We just have more on our mind, right? you know
Yeah,
we get and we're getting further and further away from, we're getting further and further away from that simplicity of simplicity and peace of, we are not our trauma.
yeah,
And that's a for me, that's a kind of a peaceful
yeah,
state. And the overthinking
yeah,
hides gets in the way of that peace. It's the opposite. Thinking is the opposite of peace.
I think there's truth in that, but I also think that you can use thinking for and against you. So it's just being nuanced about knowing when just to give yourself a break. And, like I said, I'm a coach and I am a breath worker. So the reason why I did breath work is because sometimes you got to get out of your head and you got to get into your body.
Yeah.
Right. And so I do understand that. But I also, and so I think it just depends. I think that for me, like doing that exploration, like I think it's fun and interesting and engaging. And then there's a time when I can do too much of it. So, and then there's the simplicity, but I do that with everything.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's to do with adoption, but it's definitely part of my personality.
So
Yeah.
I mean, when we look at you've relating to, so far we've been talking mainly about psychological and emotional healing,
Yeah, yeah,
and then but obviously the breath work
yeah,
that brings in a a, a body thing into
yeah,
it. So what did you say? We're getting out of our heads and into our bodies. I think you said something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because the body stores emotions, and I think that it's not really a science, it's an art form. So that and so you need to be careful with the ways that you use somatic healing processes. And the breath can, um, because of the physiological kind of changes that you can create in your body by changing like the oxygen and carbon dioxide, you can get yourself into a state where mentally, emotionally, things can change. What can really happen is you become very sensitive. You open up to sensitivities. You take down barriers sometimes and allow emotions to come out. You never know what to expect. And sometimes those emotions can be wonderful. Sometimes those emotions can be scary, or like anger, or, crying. I've had lots of different experiences, whether it be through breath work or hypnosis, where I haven't been able to express those emotions just through talk therapy or coaching or whatever it is. But when you get into a state where like your eyes close and you can relax and let down those barriers, and I think your brain does go into a different state, like the frequency that your brain is changes, then you can release things, you can process things. I think, don't know whether everyone believes that or whether, yeah, but I think that it's possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've just started some somatic therapy stuff, but it's not breath work. Um,
Okay.
what does it bring you? What does breath work bring you other than coming out of your head?
Breathwork can be used in so many different ways. So the way that we breathe can make us activated, or it can bring us down and like relax the nervous system and make us feel peaceful. And so I do a journey which is to music, and I generally do both. So I generally activate the body with activating breaths. So, and because of that activation, what I'm trying to do is allow someone to move energy. I don't do it in a really intense way. Some people can do it so that they go to a psychedelic state, like this transcendental breathwork. I don't do that, but I do push beyond sometimes the comfort, because we're not used to physiologically breathing like that, and we're not used to the state. We can feel dizzy, we can get cramping when we do that. But I will bring up the emotions, and with the intention. So we're thinking consciously the intention, but also subconsciously, and also I think on an energetic level, if you believe that stuff, the intention to release. And so I've had people like, who cry, who, we can move, like, because you're in this intuitive state, if you're in a trusting environment, the energy that's can create that atmosphere where you can express. And then I generally will, I could stay up high and energize someone and get them ready to like do some work and be really thoughtful. But what I generally do is, then what people come to me for is then to relax. So you get rid of some of this energy, this frantic energy. It might be stress or anxiety or fear, and planting seeds in the subconscious mind to do that, not just in the session but ongoing, and then using again the subconscious to plant seeds for what you want. You slow the breath down, you allow the parasympathetic nervous system to like be activated so that you create that calm. And then sometimes when I do it these days, I can just sleep, or I can go into a zen state where I'm just like, like sometimes you forget to breathe, even though it's usually a continuous breath. You kind of drop out and you forget to breathe. Or there are times where I have like visualizations,
Yeah,
and you can interpret them or not interpret them, and then just like come out of it very, very gently. And through that, people make decisions. they just feel like nice. The last time I did a group thing in session, someone said I just had this moment of my heart filling and having this incredible moment of joy. And then, the session before, one to one, like someone had cried and released all this energy from a trauma from her past. So that wasn't the intention at all, but she felt like release and kind of like peace. And you never know what's going to happen. Every time you do it, it's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it what's it brought you, so when you are working with your therapist, rather than when you're working as a therapist with a breath worker with other people? What's it brought you, that breath work?
So like I do use it in different ways. Like I do it like in person. So the times that I've done it in person, um when I do it and I've got like colleagues and stuff and we do breath work together, it has like created clarity. So like the intention can be to move through a particular life kind of obstacle or whatever. Like I've done that, and to release emotion. So I've done that in ways that I couldn't do through talk therapy. But often these days I just use it for expressing like stress and anxiety and just relaxing, like just getting into a state to start the day to create clarity. I use it, sometimes I meditate, but at the moment I'm using breathwork instead of meditation to create that. And I don't just do it live with people online or in person. I mean, them facilitating me. I also use an app. So in the morning I can wake up and do like a 10-minute just breath work. And it just relaxes me. And you can use the functional breathing patterns, when you're driving, when you're like, just all. So I use them in all different ways. I know people who've going through menopause, and I've been using them to change their fluctuations of body temperature. Like we've found breathwork patterns that lower their body temperature when they're having a hot flush, and when they're having a cold flush, it increases their temperature. So it's different for everyone.
What has it brought you kind of overall, as well as in those moments?
I guess a method that takes me out of my head and puts me into my body and allows me to release emotions and nurture my nervous system. Is that
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I'm looking for, really.
yeah,
That's, well, I didn't know what I was looking for. I was looking for your answer.
yeah,
I didn't have an answer because I've never done this stuff. Um, I'm linking it back to something else that I said at the top.
yeah,
So you said, well, we don't want to, we may not want to wash out the
yeah,
latte cup.
yeah.
Yeah, it may be. So I'm thinking, um, uh, are you talking here about breath work as a way to clean out the cup, or is it about breathing? Is it about breathing into the tough stuff?
You know what I think? Like breathing into the tough stuff, making peace with different kinds of emotions. But if we use that analogy, like, because when I say maybe we don't wash out the cup, because who we are, like our past and what happened to us is part of who we are. And we can love that part of us. So I think like part of healing is to like accept ourselves in our full humanity. So flaws and all, history and all. And so we don't want to get rid of ourselves, but maybe it's about like if you're saying like sometimes like what if we come there and there's the clean cup and then we get filled up and there's the layers and then part of life is like stirring it all up, but what if breath work helps us the layers kind of like fall into place, like there's this kind of like notion of coming into self, like being brave to be ourselves. Like I think that's part of growth, is like to just not be afraid, not pretend. Like maybe that's more what I would hope that any kind of healing does, and maybe that's what breathwork does, not to clean out the cup, but to create the clarity of the layers within the cup so that you can like
Yeah.
sit in comfort being you. Yeah. And maybe that's what healing is. Like you don't, because you don't clean out the cup. I don't know. That's just for me. Yeah.
So for me, it's when we talk about feeling whole, right? So
Yeah.
one of my definitions of healing is
Yeah.
feeling whole, and then another definition is feeling the whole of our emotions. So
Yes.
it's almost as if for me, if we are separating separating who we are from how we feel
Yeah.
in the first instance, and then embracing the whole shebang,
Yeah.
because our feelings are no longer our we realize our feelings aren't going to scold us, like
Yeah, like
I
we are
think.
not our feelings, and then we have this ability to become the watcher of our thoughts and feelings and experience. Yeah,
Yeah, we sit with
yeah,
them, and it's a
yeah,
theme that we keep on coming back to in and not every episode of the podcast, but not uh, yeah, not pouring, not being so afraid of our trauma that we need to pour it away,
yeah,
sitting
yeah,
with it,
yeah,
sitting with the heat, right?
yeah,
Because we know
yeah,
um, we know that the heat doesn't have any long-term impact on
yeah,
the cup.
yeah. I just thought, I don't know whether this is works or not, but my thought was if we're using a metaphor as like, well, feeling the emotions is like roasting the coffee beans, right? It's like and I use an analogy, and it's like for me growth is a tunnel of darkness, and there's light on either side. And the objective is to get to the other side, because right here we're here in the light, and we walk through the tunnel and we get to this place of complete darkness, and we keep on wanting to turn back to go the way we know that's comfortable. But really what we're talking about is like going through the emotion when we're growing, because I think um you know growing is expansion, and then the opposite of expansion is contraction. And so that's also what we need to heal, is the times that we've contracted. So when we're growing, we've got to have this capacity, and this is where the idea of this like roasting the coffee beans comes in. And keep moving, having blind faith that we can handle the emotions, that we're going to be okay on the other side, even though it feels disgusting. And at some moment we sit there and we're walking in pitch darkness, not knowing which direction we're going, but we need to move forward to that next place. And then we see the light. And then you said you don't even know you were in the trauma because you're just in the darkness. But then when you start to see the light, then you can look back and go, oh, I see what just happened. I was walking through the process. But if we never go through it, you want to jump over it. You want to dig under it. You want to just not experience it.
Yes, and our going back to something that you said earlier on, you talked about you didn't if we just call this cultural trauma, right? Just for the sake of putting it in two words, right? You didn't see your cultural trauma until you were teaching Aborigines about their cultural
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
So our that was another fog lift moment. That was another coming out of the fog moment. You'd been in that you'd been in that darkness for so long, you'd become
Yeah.
used to that,
Yeah.
and you only came into the light when you were actually talking about other people's. You think,
Yeah.
I've felt, I've felt what they felt.
Yeah.
I've suffered from what they've suffered from, or similar kind of two stuff.
Yeah.
So it's our, it's like quoting it by Jung: until we make the subconscious conscious, it will rule our life, and we will call it fate. Right? It's about a
Yeah.
series of coming out of the fog moments.
Yeah.
It's coming out of the fog again and again and again, and the peeling back of the layers of the trauma. So we're peeling back the transracial piece, we're peeling back the relational piece, we're peeling back the in utero piece, we're peeling them all
Yeah.
back, and we've got this cake, we've got this trauma cake,
Yeah.
but and we are the cake stand. We are
Yeah.
we are
And
the place on which all that trauma is sitting.
yeah. And when you talk about that, what it makes me think about is like if I, because I'm thinking of like the walking through the dark tunnel. And what happens is when we're walking towards the light, we can't imagine that it's really easy. It's actually really hard, even though we've seen the light, because the actions that we take and the decisions that we make and the beliefs that we have to be willing to change are really uncomfortable. And so to actually go through that personal growth and to move through that process of healing, we actually have to be willing to move towards discomfort. So whether that be learning a new language or like, you know, like changing the relationship with your adoptive parent to say like, this is something that I'm going to do and it's different, you know, all those things.
So therein lies uh, the barrier to healing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I was I'm working on this. I tell you about this trauma framework I'm working on. Sorry, the healing framework I'm working on. See, I fell into
Oh
my own
yeah.
thing. Yeah, I'm working on this healing framework at the moment. So basically, I'm trying to distill everything that I hear from fellow adoptees, everything that they share with me, everything that fellow adoptees share with me. I've done like a questionnaire, sent out a questionnaire on asking these questions about what does healing mean to you, what's helped you heal, what's hindered your healing. I'm looking at those questions, those three questions, and the healing moments question. Looking at those on one side, but across the top of the page, I'm looking at the different healing bits. So we've talked about psychological, we've talked about emotional, we've talked about physical, biological, we've talked about, but not so much maybe social and relational. And then we also we started off really about talking about the social, sorry, the spiritual and the essential, the, you know, what is our essence. And one of the, I'm coming up with these other ideas, like, so how do we make this framework work for people? How do we make it into a roadmap? And the questions that are coming to mind on the basis of our conversation are we willing to feel that pain?
Yeah.
Are we are we willing to be wrong about what we believe?
Mm.
Do we do we believe that we can heal? Because based on some of the answers to the questionnaires I've had, people don't believe those. Some people that answer that questionnaire don't believe that they can heal. Now, that's going to get in the way, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. Oh my gosh. This is like, So when I coach, there's always like a like a domino effect, and often you come up to this, and that's the domino piece where it's like, if you don't think that it's possible to change your thinking or belief system or heal, that's what you're talking about, then you can't change. That's like the belief. That's the belief that it's going to block you. It's the obstacle. So, like, I often will spend like sessions and sessions and sessions with one client just exploring that. Like, why do you believe that? Why do you want to believe that? Why, are you holding on to it? What else could you believe? Is the opposite true? Like, all these things. And, my job as a coach is to just be curious. I'm not trying to change their mind, but then showing them, like, look at this one thought. It's like, oh yeah. And we keep coming, for some people we keep coming back. It's like that neural pathway is so deep within them. And below that there might be something that's a belief system about who they are. They don't deserve to heal, or you know what I mean? Like there's something about worthiness, or that it comes in at the crux of it, that sometimes just for some people you can just wobble that belief system, and then the whole thing collapses. It's like a table with all these legs, and you can cut a few down and then the whole thing, but until they're willing to investigate, it's kind of like, well, it's not going to be possible.
How do you think that trauma affects our beliefs?
Um, Trauma makes it feel visceral. That's what I think, because it's stored in the body. So it's really hard for us to separate our experience from our thinking. And most of us don't realize our thoughts are optional anyway. So we just think, like, for me, shame was a huge emotion that I had to make friends with. When I was doing my master coach training, that was like my main kind of like obstacle, was just like making friends with shame. Because we think that it's true, we think that it's who we are, and then like that's, of course, that's, how can we change that? And then the worthiness piece, is so integral. Like, and for some of us, it needs to be just laying the foundation of being willing to believe something new, being willing to like have positive thoughts about yourself, because some of us don't want to give ourselves permission to do that for whatever reason. And then it's like, well, what do you want to fight for? Because at the moment you're fighting for you being small, you're fighting for your pain, you're fighting for the trauma. So you have to decide. No one can make you, but asking the right questions, I think, can provide avenues for someone to just open a crack. Like I say, like there's a door and there's like light behind the door, and you just open that little crack and let a little light through. And once you've opened that little crack, that gap is going to get bigger and bigger if you're willing to let it. But you have to do it consciously. I really think you have to be conscious about it and do it deliberately. And remember, there's a difference between your conscious, like cognitive mind, and your subconscious mind. And you can, like manage your mind. Basically, you can't control your mind, but you can manage your mind.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
much how much talk do you hear about beliefs in your world in down in Australia, and with other adoptees? How much talk is there of beliefs?
I don't know. I mean, it's only recently that I've become more connected to adoptee communities. I think more we talk about our experiences. I do have a very close friend who's also an adoptee, and we talk about our belief systems, like beliefs around, and we share lots of, short videos on Instagram which talks about stuff that we've talked about, like the kinds of traumas, how they manifest, the kinds of families that we've been adopted into, and how to heal. But I don't know what adoptees in general are talking about in Australia in terms of beliefs.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I saw a great. I don't know if I mentioned this on the recent podcast, or just another conversation I had with an adoptee. So apologies, listeners, if you've heard this one from me before. And yeah, I think it's really profound for me, and I don't mind that I'm repeating it. So I saw something, a video from Gabor Mate talking about not, and this wasn't adoptee specific, this was human race specific, right? Feeling like we're not good enough, right? And he said, that's not a feeling. Feeling sad, feeling happy,
Yeah.
feeling nervous, feeling stressed, feeling confident. Those are feelings. Feeling you're not good enough is not a feeling, it's a belief.
But see, I think shame's the feeling that comes from that belief. What do you think?
I agree.
Yeah. So I agree with, yeah, I can see that, like I'm not enough is what creates that, but also a visceral feeling of like the shame that comes up. I think, I went to a school, coaching school, which always said it always goes like circumstance triggers a thought, triggers a feeling, that drives an action that creates a result. But the truth is, it's the cycle. Like we have a feeling, we have a thought, and then one triggers the other, and but I think, yeah, when we can make peace with the fact that we're all humans and everyone, including Beyonce, including, everyone, just has that experience where we feel shame. It's just the nature of the world, nature of humans. And once we can make peace with that, then we can show up more authentically as we are and tell our truth and then show up whole. You used the word whole before. That's healing. Yeah.
The biggest breakthrough for me on this subject
Yeah.
has been seeing that the difference between feeling whole and being whole, right? So spiritually, I believe that we are all of us already whole, right? Psychologically, we'll be healing forever.
Mm.
And there's a freedom in that. I'm far more interested in who I am than how I feel.
Yeah.
And I'm just want to take it back because I'm in danger of putting too much of my stuff in here. It seems it is, getting rid of shame seems like a really tough task for me.
Yeah.
And a lot tougher than exploring the belief
Yeah.
that we're not good enough. Do you see what I mean?
But we don't get rid of it. We just make peace with it. We make friends and we know. So this is there was an epiphany that I had, and it's not to do with adoption, but it was to do with shame. And so I would one of the things that I kept feeling when I was stepping outside my comfort zone. I was just like racked with shame. Like this, thoughts, I'm not good enough, I failed, I'm gonna do it wrong, no one likes me, I don't belong here. Like all of these things were coming up. And and then I was walking, I can't remember, it's just like I would go and lie down and just be like, okay, this is shame, this is shame, this is shame. And I was walking down the street and I was just so consumed. I'm like, this is horrible. And there was just this moment where I was like, hang on, like, even though it seems so simple now, I say it now, but it was this moment where I had the clarity, like, oh, I'm experiencing shame. I'm thinking these thoughts. Like, as humans, it's so part of us to believe that this is what we're in, that when we become the watcher and we have this moment, and what I realized as I growing, I still do it. I still get to the place where like, oh, this is horrible. Like this is so shameful. Like, blah. But then the distance between you being in it and then you being able to go, hang on a minute, I'm okay. Like I'm watching myself and I'm watching this experience. And yes, this is horrible. You don't like gaslight yourself. And yes, I'm feeling it. I can process it. I can move through it. And I know at some point I'm going to realize that that was just the experience and I'm going to move through it and I'll be on the other side. So I don't think it's about getting rid of shame. I just made friends with shame. I'm like, and there was a point where I was like, oh, the shame's gone. Of course the shame doesn't go. The shame's going to come back all the time. It's fine. But I'm like okay with that. I'm like, I'm not, because what we tend to do is we resist or we cover up our emotions with like food and, dopamine, watching TV, whatever it is that we do. Um, and then, or you just run away and pretend it's not there. But then when we like open, which is what you've talked about, and then we have the ability to be the watcher, that's what I think is healing. I was going to write a blog post the other day about the shame storm. Before I would have just been in the shame storm, but now when I'm a shame storm, it's actually growth. I use the shame storm for my own personal growth. I use it for me instead of against me. I'm like, oh, here I am again, and that's okay. I get it now.
Yeah, it's powerful, very powerful. At
Yeah.
some point uh, during that last section of I don't want to, something you said adoption and shame weren't you said this isn't to do with adoption, this is to do
Yeah.
with shame.
I think because it wasn't, I don't, I mean, I guess who I am, that's part of who I am, but it wasn't, it was just, yeah, I think it was because I was stepping outside my comfort zone and it was just, I don't know, I didn't connect it with adoption.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether it is, like,
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It was
so
just an emotion. It was just the humanity of it. It's just like a human part of who, that's all it was. It's just a human experience.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. There's real genius in that uh, making friends with shame. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other throwaway truth bomb that I loved. You said thoughts are optional.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think in the moment we can always change a thought, but I think sometimes we can, and it can be authentically like we can just release the thought or change the thought. But we do have the power, even if we can't change the thought in the moment, to manage our mind, which is create new neural pathways. So when we give ourselves permission to believe something new, then we can practice something new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just go back to the shame thing for a minute? I shouldn't have taken that.
Yeah.
I'm taking it back in circles, going round and round. Do clients come to you wanting to get rid of shame?
No, they don't even realize they have it. They don't even realize they have it. That's just part and parcel of the process of these conversations. That's not the reason. Yeah, no. They come because they want an external goal that they want fulfilled. There's obstacles that they're trying to fix. And then so then as a person who understands, like who's studied the way humans work and has tools to help people change the way that they think and the way they experience emotions, you use all of those so that the results that they want and the process that they use is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does the shame go of its own course, or is that still left behind, or does that depend, or what?
I think over time, like we work on it on so many different levels. So whether it's like emotionally making peace with experiencing the shame, or whether it's changing the neural pathways, like we're laying down new tracks. And so the beliefs that, whether it be like I'm enough, I'm worthy, like laddering thoughts, whether because let's use a specific example. Let's imagine someone who um I'm trying to think of something that's worthiness, but I mean, worthiness comes into almost everything that we do. So it's someone who's overeating, I mean, for a while as a weight loss coach, someone who's overeating, who's compulsively going to the fridge at night and they're doing that. I mean, shame will come into that. Shame will come into that because, like, part of the process of deciding to not eat is a loving gift to yourself to do what is best for you. Eating the food can be love sometimes and nurturing and the exact right thing to do. But when you're compulsively eating to cover up emotions or to escape something from yourself, then what's underlying that is a sense of lack of worth. So when you learn how to make yourself important, prioritize yourself, and do things from a place of self-love, then of course all of the thoughts that we come to are probably going to be related in some way to worthiness and shame. Yeah. So one of the processes that I think, if you that I love to sort of use is like I say turning inside out. Because in this world, what we tend to do is we tend to fuel ourselves with negativity and insecurity, and scarcity. And so if you're doing that, like, it drains you of energy. You don't, and you never really give yourself the acknowledgement. And I say the metaphor that I use is like you're climbing up this mountain. You want to get to the top of the mountain, and so you're throwing yourself against these cliffs and you're climbing and clawing up. Some people get there and they're like, okay, I'm here, I need to get to the next mountain. But when we're fueled, we turn inside out, which is like this process of like then fueling ourselves with abundance. Like, we want to get to the top of the mountain, but not because it's going to mean that we're better, that we're enough, that we're worthy, that we're successful. It doesn't matter. When we get to the place where we're doing it because we want to, and we have this innate choice, then the whole thing changes, because you're like looking at the butterflies as they go by, you're breathing the fresh air, and when you get to the top, all there is another mountain, but it doesn't matter because you choose the next mountain that you want to. So that's the process. Like, you do it because you want to. That's life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Feels like a good place to bring it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought we might get to this space. You feel that space just there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, listeners. Thanks, Nicky. We'll speak to you very soon. Take care.
Thank you.